Welcome to More to Know on Daily Ad Brief. I'm your host, Kent Lewis. Joining us today from Salem, Oregon is Roy Steves with StatBid. Welcome to the show, Roy.
Thanks for having me, Ken.
You bet. In 30 seconds or less, please tell our viewers a little about yourself.
I'm a recovering programmer that's made the migration over to marketing over the past 10 years or so. And now I run a search marketing agency for e-commerce businesses in particular, which is where my co-founder and I both come from as e-commerce operators.
So, how and when roughly did you decide to make the jump from, client side to agency side?
I was a part of a company that was acquired by a big national brick and mortar chain. And so after a couple of years in a cubicle farm climbing the ladder, I realized it wasn't really my scene. And so I'd really enjoyed going to conferences and sharing insights from my own analysis with other attendees. And so I was looking for ways to have more fun conversations with other entrepreneurs. And starting a service business seemed like the shortest path to having that sort of one to many relationship. Because when you're in house, it turns into an echo chamber, and so I was really looking for a way where I'd be able to have fairly open conversations with lots of entrepreneurs in the space, and so becoming a service provider for the types of companies that I like interacting with was a pretty good opportunity. And obviously, I already had the expertise in terms of the implementation, if not how to run an agency. I certainly knew how to run campaigns, but that was enough to get things started. And so we founded StatBid in 2015 and have been growing fairly consistently since that time, focusing almost entirely on efficient management of ad spend, and then we also expanded into SEO. So the idea being that we're trying to double down on our expertise around search as a meta platform.
And what kind of, I know you've been in the business, in e-commerce and digital marketing business for some time, and maybe 7 or so years as an agency. But what do you see are the
Mhm.
common or the current challenges you're facing, primarily as a service provider, in this, some potentially economic uncertainty coming around the corner here, if not already here? What are you dealing with as an agency slash service provider?
Well, the volatility is sort of a mixed blessing. Anytime anything gets harder, then if you're able to navigate that new challenge, you have a competitive advantage. So for us, some of it is related to the changes in tracking and privacy rules. The third-party cookie sunset is obviously on our horizon as a cause of a lot of the things that we expect to see changing, but also a tendency for the platforms, especially Google, but you've seen the same thing from Apple and Facebook, where they're trying to hoard their data internally more and more and not share as much data out for perfectly valid privacy reasons. But from their perspective, it's mostly a liability control. So as users of those platforms, when we have less and less data available, it becomes a fertile environment for pseudoscientific approaches to start to take hold. In the absence of data, humans are very good at convincing themselves of their own precognizance. And so the challenge is becoming navigating and getting buy-in from people to follow a data-driven approach when that data becomes more and more scarce.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think that goes to an earlier question that you'd answered on our intake form about the idea of how do we most effectively communicate? It's following the data. And I think you nailed that one. So with that said, recession or not, what do you think are going to be the major trends you're going to see in e-commerce marketing in the next 2 to 3 years?
Well, we're going to continue to see pressure on inflation, for example. You're talking the really macro stuff. You're going to see continued pressure on inflation, not driven necessarily by the usual macroeconomic trends, but because individual things are going to get more expensive. Expect semiconductors as a perfect example, but also energy. So if semiconductors and energy continue to become more expensive, then everything that they're in, which is almost everything, becomes more expensive. And when everything becomes more expensive, another word for that is inflation. So even if the U.S. Mitigates a lot of those effects, that pressure will remain in place. So you're going to see continued competition for what available spending dollars households and businesses have. So it'll end up being like navigating through a recession, which some of us have done before, but telling which cause is going to be the louder signal, whether it's the recessionary impact of the economic changes that we're seeing within the market or from regulation, or whether it's the inflationary effects coming from a more global perspective. Either way, we're going to see a tighter constriction of that available excess financial power, both in terms of the customers, but then upstream at the companies that are trying to service those customers. So that means that you're going to see more and more scrutiny put onto things like ad budgets at exactly the time when there's going to be less concrete data to make decisions around that same ad budget concept. So I anticipate more and more pressure, but I don't necessarily think that pressure is going to be productive. I think there's going to be a lot of wasted energy and hand wringing because uh, we haven't really trained ourselves to think as rationally and as rigorously as we will need to, because things have been easy, and so that has made a lot of things um, less critical to get just right. And so we'll start to see some more consolidation within service providers. Bringing it back to your question specifically for service providers, um, when that happens, mediocre service providers end up being acquired or shutting down. And so I expect to see continued consolidation within that space, but that also leaves room for niche providers that can solve a particular version of a given problem a little bit better for a very specific type of client within that space. So it might be bad news overall, but it's bad news that produces opportunities that we can sort of truffle pig our way through.
I've been through a few recessions myself. I totally agree with you on that, and I think there's always some silver lining. Well, those are some
Yeah.
great insights. Thank you, Roy, for sharing your knowledge with us today. To find out more about this episode's guest and topic, please visit dailyadbrief.com, and we hope you'll join us next time on More to Know.
Simplify presents Addressable CTV, combining the power of TV with the targeting and attribution of digital. Simplify's Addressable CTV delivers massive reach with the ability to scale without sacrificing precision. TV buyers can generate incremental reach with household level targeting, frequency controls, reporting, and insights. To learn more about Simplify's Addressable CTV and what it can do for your clients, visit simply.fi.